Okay, so I think we're live. I can see we're getting a few people joining us in the room. Hopefully that'll keep skyrocketing up. So firstly, welcome everyone. Welcome to the feedback session for yesterday's co-design workshop. We had with ourselves community members from Tower Hamlets joining forces with architects and urban designers from Create Streets with the challenge of designing affordable, beautiful, we hope, homes near the Grade 1 listed Church of St George in the East, which was designed by Nicholas Hawksmoor. Firstly, I'd like to welcome our feedback panel. We've got joining us Revd Angus Ritchie, having worked in East End churches and has been involved in organising since 1998. Angus is now serving as director at St George in the East. We've also got Miriam Brittenden, who coordinates the Centre for Theology and Community's Buxton Leadership Programme, and she's the community organiser for Shadwell Responds during the pandemic. We also have Shermara Fletcher, who is head of St George's Open Table Ministry with the homeless community as well. So thank you guys for joining us and welcome. What we're going to do today is quickly give you a bit of background from some of the work which initially has taken place before Create Streets got involved, then some of the work we've done in 2019, and then give you a little update as well on what happened yesterday. So, moment of truth, I will share my screen. And hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Miriam just to sort of give us a flavour of what happened, previously before Create Streets got involved.
Absolutely, thank you, David. Just to give a bit of background on Shadwell as a place, it's in the borough of Tower Hamlets, which as a whole faces really huge housing challenges, massive lack of affordable housing and overcrowding and homelessness. And I think as a church, we're responsive to the fact that most people around here, I think, feel that housing development is something which is done to them and not for them or with them, and we wanted to change that. So we are a church and a community that has a track record of campaigning around affordable housing. So back in 2018, there was a 3-year campaign which resulted in winning a community land trust just next to the church. So that will be up to 40 homes that are designed by and for the local community and will stay at a permanently affordable price, which is an amazing legacy. And it was great to have lots of those involved in that campaign and taking that forwards now in the workshops yesterday. And actually during the pandemic, we had a £2 million grant from the GLA to really kickstart that building. So that's amazing. But I think something we recognise from our listening is that one housing development is amazing, but wouldn't another one be great, or wouldn't several more be great? And we actually have some space around our church which is currently not being used very effectively that we think could be. So that's kind of where Create Streets came in, and I'll hand back to David to talk a bit about the initial workshops that we had as a church with Create Streets last summer in 2019.
Thank you, Miriam. Yeah, so we were welcomed to St George in the East, and I think we were, this has been probably one of the most exciting projects that Create Streets has been involved in for the last 2 years because of the heritage, the historic nature, but also the community sort of will and drive that was apparent when we first came along. So we started our programme back in 2019 called Place Champions. It's a project that aims to, not just design with the local communities, but help to sort of empower them as well and train them with issues around urban design, regeneration, how they can influence these processes to their advantage and to address, as Miriam said, these incredibly important housing needs. We collaborated with Tower Hamlets Citizens, with architects, urban designers. We brought along John Thompson Partners as well to join us with some of the code design sessions. And, why we're doing this in essence is to develop land for affordable homes in St George in the East Church, where housing actually, did used to exist less than 70 years ago. I think it's a chance for community to create a vision which will help them, transform their space as they see fit. So here's a quick sort of timeline. Hopefully you can sort of squint and see this, just to show, from 2019, and obviously a lot of work that went on before that, how this has sort of progressed with various site visits, walking tours, design workshops. We've had visits with Historic England, cognizant of the heritage context which we've got here, engaging with the wider community through the end of 2019. Then obviously a big sort of blank where we have COVID-19, but actually we'll ask Miriam in a second to sort of talk about some of the fantastic work that the same community members did in response to that, which has helped to sort of strengthen these bonds. And then finishing up with yesterday's code design workshop. A quick background to the site. We divided it into sites A, B, and C. You can see site A just to the south of the church, site B where there's an existing leisure centre, and site C, which is currently undeveloped. And we decided to focus on site A on the corner, just to the southeast corner of the church, and on site C, where there's a really exciting chance to use and create affordable housing for the homeless and temporary accommodation for the homeless. And we'll see here, the first session was a kick-off session where we came to give a presentation about urban design, listen to the community, hear what their values were. We ran a good exercise called essentially the neighbourhood knowledge exercise, where we're asking people places that you like, places you dislike, where would you like to improve this? And we all gathered around big A0 satellite map of the area. And the feedback we got is that people really like St George's Gardens in the area just to the east of the church. There's a dislike to the quite fast 4-lane highway just to the south of the church, and there was a real strong desire to do something on site C, which we can see highlighted in yellow, and to look at meanwhile housing on the empty sites directly across the road to the south of the highway. We conducted some walking tours and site visits where we give everyone a sort of score sheet and take them to different locations. We looked around St George in the East, but also took them up to Bethnal Green as well to see recent developments, and to find out what kind of materials they like, what kind of open space would they like. Do you want private gardens, communal gardens, balconies, all these kind of questions. Some of the key ideas being that we need to solve the air quality and noise pollution, which is no easy feat. Preference for traditional facades, a desire for the community cafe, looking at meanwhile shelters for the homeless. And then all of this kind of led us to our third session, which was a workshop last summer, when we had the joys of being able to meet in person, and we separated into tables looking at the master plan for the site. We had a table looking at how do we tame the highway, and we had some fantastic ideas around narrowing Cannon Street Road, enhancing the views of St George in the East, improving lighting so that people feel safe walking around at night, and then looking at homes for the homeless to the south, you can see, and linking the sort of vista and a raised crossing across the highway to a new plaza just to the south of St George in the East, which would hopefully bring to life an area which we think could be improved massively. And you can see a few of the key ideas around cafes and fountains, and putting some community land trust housing there. So if I quickly ask, so Miriam, it'd be helpful we then sort of stepped out as COVID hit and we couldn't carry on with some of the workshops. And I know that you led the Shadwell Responds programme. Maybe it's worth just talking about that quick.
Sure. Would it also be helpful just to talk a little bit about the extra engagement that we did manage to do?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
In February before the pandemic. So I suppose we, after having done those sessions in summer of last year, we recognised the need to engage a bit more deeply with other institutions, other people across the neighbourhood, and get their kind of insight and ideas into the process. So we kind of had a team of people that were very keen in making this happen at St George's, went out along with myself to do a set of workshops. So in the end, I think we were able to have, including one additional ones at the church, 6 across different schools, places of worship, community centres, and we kind of did a sort of mini repeat version of that workshop. So we did the neighbourhood knowledge preference exercise, and also kind of getting people's thoughts on broader questions around how they like to shape and change the area. And that was exciting. And I think, some interesting themes that emerged from that, I think, were that there is a huge amount of support for affordable housing, particularly an idea that the city is really creeping in. I think you can see that on the map, and people feeling really quite anxious about the fact that their children are quite possibly going to not be able to live anywhere near them when they grow up. A real also desire to really reimagine the spaces around potential housing. So making the park safer, thinking about things like allotments, thinking about air and noise pollution, and making safer crossings. There was a lot of support for that. And I think, we engaged about 100 people, and we had hopes to engage a lot more than that. But as David said, we rightly felt it was appropriate to pause that and focus more on kind of a collective community-wide response to the pandemic. So that was a kind of network of different churches, our schools, and we did various different things, centering around a kind of weekly Zoom call. We had set up a hardship fund, a fund for digital access for school children, and had a campaign around the government's free school meal scheme, which was exciting, and Iceland were added, so that was brilliant. And we had a really exciting assembly with local politicians as well, which I think Angus might talk a little bit more about in terms of Site C and the possibility there. So yeah, that was kind of what we got up to then. But we are excited now about the possibility of doing some more community listening. And I suppose one thing to emphasise is that, if anything, I think housing, the need for affordable housing is probably more exposed than it was before, because of the amount of stories of families locked down together in very small, overcrowded accommodation. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And this brought us back to yesterday, where we, as much as we would have loved to have done this in person, with sort of new guidelines out, we felt that we needed to switch this to be an online event. So I think, we were a little bit concerned, might be an understatement, how it would work, having obviously a live audience, with the community members as well, designing, we had different design packages, we had Robert Quayleck, one of the designers, was using his digital sketch pad as well, and then also we're sort of collecting all the information on another digital whiteboard. So we made it as complicated for ourselves as we could possibly try, but hopefully you'll see, we feel we managed to get some of the community's ideas onto paper, as it were. We're asking key questions around how people feel about the height of the building, concerns about the site and surroundings, the busy road to the south. How do you get into the homes? Do people prefer private gardens, communal gardens, both of them? What would you change on the road, and how would you get around if you lived in this development? We can see, hopefully here, some of the very initial sketches which came up live. You can see this is just, we're focusing on the corner to the southeast of St George in the East, looking at creating some terrace homes, 3 to 4 stories potentially. Initially we started with a block, as you can see on the left. I pulled out a few quotes which we had. I know we had comments about having pitched roofs to allow glimpses of the church, which led to some of the pitched roofs you can see on the right. There was a desire to introduce a curve to the building to sort of respond to St George in the East, to which someone then asked, can we maybe have a roof garden on this? So we started to model up some of the roof gardens and how people would access the building itself. There was a lot of debate around private gardens behind it versus communal, and how people would get through this space. Is it walled off? Is it not walled off? Is it open, etc.? And I think really the whole process is to sort of tease out these ideas and these thoughts. And this design here is very much just a suggestion, a potential option that could be taken forward. But actually having all the information from the community, we hope that there's the sense of ownership of this in the whole design process. And here's a couple more images as well, you can see, with some of the balconies on the back. And this final image is just because there's so many designs that you always see from the air and from 200-300 feet, and actually not that many people see housing and homes and new development from the air. So actually it's very important to kind of put yourself down at the human scale and see what would it look like and how does it fit with St George in the East in the background. Before we sort of get some feedback, we then went on to Site C and looking at temporary homes accommodation. There was this lovely quote from Rosalie, St George in the East leader. From nothing you can become somebody, and you can develop skills and talent for yourself and get away from your stresses. The homeless can get into their own individual block that is reasonable for them and for their future. They don't have to be in the street. And we took this, inspirational message, hopefully, and started looking at, again, height, looking at how would you get into the homes, what kind of facilities should be included, should we include gardens and green open space? And there was a real belief, I think, to sort of design this in the same way that we would design something quite permanent, and sort of treat this very similarly. And you'll see a few different options of sketches where we had accommodation to the west of the site. Then we looked at what kind of buildings, what kind of facilities would we need to include, from community cafes, doctor surgeries. I know there was comments on hairdressers, on showers, on building a sort of plaza in the middle. And you can see we took a few of the examples of similar temporary accommodation elsewhere in Ilford and in Ealing, and we started to model these and just give a sense of what could it look like. And you can see we've got this central area, central square, if you like, which is surrounded by the services and amenities which would be helpful, with accommodation to the edges. So I'm going to stop sharing there. Hopefully that's all gone off and we can see everyone who's back on the screen. And I can see, hi, we've got Sarah, Emily as well. So thank you for joining us, Sarah. So I think maybe a few questions, possibly first for Shermara, just to ask you, how did you find the process? I mean, sort of don't hold back if you you don't want to as well. And how did you find the afternoon yesterday?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the process. I enjoyed the afternoon. There was over 90 people on the call, and it was such a collaborative process. We had, top end designers showing us how our concepts can actually become a reality, looking at how, particularly on Site C, the containers can exist in a space. And for me personally, it helped me to think, how would a homeless person who is potentially trying to recover or reintegrate back into society feel living amongst community and on that site? And yesterday really brought that to reality. Also, because it was so collaborative, we had over 90 people on the call, people were able to give their views. Some things you don't think about within your small team, but when you then think with others, you get a much broader view of the possibilities of what can happen. A year ago, if someone had told me we'd be sitting down in the midst of a pandemic, looking at how to create life, houses, affordable homes, containers, I would think you're having a laugh. But to see that this has been possible and to see what will happen has just been so inspiring. I mean, we know there's been technical difficulties, and I think going forward, we could look at how we could get more involvement from, I guess, local people who don't have access to technology. But apart from that, a really great process, really enjoyable, brought a concept to life, and we had expertise to really help us think, how can this happen?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think Angus and I were sort of chatting before we came live about how you sort of have the balance between the technology and the in-person experience, and maybe, looking at, can we do ways where we sort of have the designers, projected into a room where people are, the community members are able to interact, where they don't have access to this kind of tech, and how we can sort of mix the two, the physical and the digital, which I think is, one of the lessons that's probably come from this. I know as well, we heard, from some of the community members, that, there's a lot of talking going on, and when can we start taking action? And I guess maybe for Angus, what do you think and what do you believe the next steps might be to start actually taking these designs and making them a reality?
Yeah, I think there's a sort of two parallel processes that need to go on. One, probably particularly on Site C in the first instance, there are things to move forward about land ownership, planning. There's, as I think Shermara was sharing yesterday, we've got a really exciting partnership which could deliver the actual the housing and the care that's already on offer. So I think on Site C, there are real possibilities quite soon. On both sites, I think that can go in tandem with this ongoing process of engagement. I think what we saw yesterday was a beginnings of a conversation, and it was good in the Site C workshop to begin to think, well, who else needs to be in that conversation? Homeless people, currently and formerly homeless people, have been part of some of the workshops that have already happened, but making sure that they continue to be engaged, and also particularly engaging some of the people who now live in Malachi Palace in Redbridge. What is working? What are the lessons? What might people do a bit differently next time? So I think there's a whole set of conversations now needed to move this forward.
Brilliant, thank you. I think I guess as well, we know that when we initially started working back in 2019, we were looking at the land ownership around this, just to the south of the site, where you had some owned by the church, some owned by the council, and then the sort of tricky situation with what we called Site C, which in this presentation and the design yesterday, we're looking at the temporary homeless shelters. I was wondering, Shermara, this might be sort of your area of expertise, if there's been any updates or any kind of movement on the ownership question to the south?
Yes, so a team of us have been looking into that particular, I guess, obstacle of who owns the land. And as of yesterday, one of the members of our team has actually found the owner and address, which is just so timely, so timely for this conference, and just a real encouragement that we are moving in the right direction. So we'll continue our conversations with the national citizens as well as our local council, who have been really quite supportive in this venture to really now start getting the information we need for having that land.
Brilliant. Well, that's a great update to hear. I think I look forward to speaking a bit more on that and getting into it. So it sounds positive already. And maybe Miriam, to bring you in as well, like what, aside from the land question which we've had, what do you think the key challenges for the transformation of St George as a whole might be? Because I know it's not just one site, as it were. It's actually the gardens and the surrounding lands and the homeless accommodation as well.
Yeah, I think a few different challenges. I think one is around funding, and that's an ongoing challenge for both the kind of technical feasibility studies, planning applications, all of that kind of thing, but also for kind of support to do this community engagement, which is so important. And that's probably the second one, which is around people, because ultimately the problem we have generally as a society is that we don't engage people in planning and development, and that's what we want to do through this project. And we've engaged a number of people, but there's lots more that we could. So I think how we do that well and do that in a context where probably social distancing is going to be with us for a long time is a challenge. But I think it's been a real encouragement, this event, to see that can work really well. And I think, that's also important to get the political support that we need from different sides. There's been some encouraging conversations with the local council about Site C, but we'll have to see what happens with the wider transformation. And I think also, heritage, bearing in mind it's a grade 1 listed building. We've had some good conversations with people like Historic England and the Georgian Society, but I think, keen to keep them in the loop with all of this and keep them on board. So that'd be the key challenges, I think.
Brilliant. So I guess giving people the capacity to keep doing this and to keep engaging with the community. So it's not just one-off events here and there, and then also broadening that support both politically and just getting as many local people and local institutions and organisations involved and supporting as possible. Looking at the time, we've got only a very quick session. I think all the designs we'll look to sort of share with everyone, so people watching can have another look at those designs. It's been hopefully a very ambitious day yesterday, and we took quite a bold step to do this in public and to do this live design. There's a lot going on with sites A, B, C, St George's Gardens. Potentially, I don't know, Angus, this could all feel quite daunting. Do you think maybe we're being a bit too ambitious with the whole project?
Well, I think when you look back, in 2015, there were only 15 people at St George's, and you've got, in what's happened since, the community engagement, the growth. We've got a site where there will be 40 homes, and Sarah Emily leading up the Community Land Trust there. And during the pandemic, while we've been doing all the other stuff, securing a £2 million grant for that. And I think what it's shown is the level of need of housing in Shadwell. And what's happened is that first victory has inspired people not just to say, well, let's just do that, but that's a springboard which has expanded people's sense of what's possible and is engaging more people because they know this isn't just a talking shop, that these kind of conversations can lead to real change. So I think more excited than daunted, because there is a track record now.
Thank you so much. So I guess the need justifies the ambition is sort of the message. I think we need to maybe be ambitious to sort of help with these pressing issues. I think that's all the time we've got. I think we need to make way apparently for the Secretary of State or something like that. But I do hope that anyone who's sort of watching or has kind of been involved over the past 2 days, if you think you can you've got something to offer, you've got some ideas, some thoughts on the designs or on the engagement, please do get in touch with Create Streets or with St George in the East. I'd like to thank Angus, Shermara, Miriam, Sarah Emily and everyone. I've got a long list of names, but I can't thank everyone from the community who was involved yesterday. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.